Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm 26 years old and I'm disabled. I have severe chronic migraines and really bad epilepsy that makes it impossible for me to work. It's been hard, but I've learned to manage with help from my family. My mother was the one who took care of me for years. She helped me with everything, from making sure I took my medications on time to being my representative payee, which meant she handled my disability benefits and made sure all my bills were paid. She was my rock, my support system, the person I could always count on. Then May 7th happened. My mother passed away and my entire world fell apart. I didn't know how I was going to manage without her. I was lost, grieving, and struggling to even get out of bed most days. The migraines got worse from the stress and I had more seizures than usual. Everything felt like too much. My aunt had been living with us since January. She and my mother had always been close. And when she lost her job, my mother invited her to stay with us while she got back on her feet. When my mother died, my aunt stepped up in a way I never expected. She became my new representative payee and took over as my caregiver. She didn't have to do it, but she did anyway. We were both grieving, but we were trying to help each other through it. Last week we needed to go grocery shopping. We were running low on food and couldn't put it off any longer, but it was a bad day for me. I'd had a migraine the night before that lasted until morning, and I was exhausted. The thought of getting dressed in regular clothes felt impossible. So I stayed in my pajamas, a black shirt and black floral shorts. They were comfortable and honestly, I didn't care what anyone thought. I just needed to get through the shopping trip without triggering another migraine or seizure. We went to the grocery store and my aunt and I split up to make things faster. She went down one aisle while I went down the next to grab something we needed. I was standing there trying to focus through the fog in my brain when another woman entered the aisle. She looked to be in her 50s or 60s. It was hard to tell exactly. But what wasn't hard to tell was the disgusted look she gave me when she saw me. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was having a bad day too. But then she walked right up to me and started talking. She asked me if I thought it was appropriate to wear pajamas in public. I was so shocked I couldn't even respond at first. My brain was still foggy and I couldn't process what was happening. She continued saying that this was a public place, not my bedroom, and that I should have some respect for the people around me. I tried to apologize and explain that I was just having a rough day, but she cut me off. She said that a rough day was no excuse for looking like I just rolled out of bed. Then she asked where my mother was and said that my mother should be ashamed of herself for letting me leave the house like this. She didn't know my mother had just died. She didn't know anything about my situation. But hearing her criticize my mother, who had done everything for me, made me feel sick. I tried to tell her that she didn't understand that my mother had passed away, but she wouldn't let me finish. She went on about how my mother clearly didn't care about teaching me proper behavior. She said that young people these days have no sense of decorum and started talking about how things were different when she was my age. She kept going on, and I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. I think she assumed I was much younger than I actually was, probably around 16 or 18 because of how I looked. But that didn't give her the right to talk to me like that. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there frozen while she continued her lecture. Then my aunt appeared. She must have heard the commotion because she came around the corner with our cart and immediately saw what was happening. She walked right up to us and the woman turned to her, probably assuming she was my mother. The woman asked if my aunt was my mother and said that she should be absolutely ashamed of herself for allowing me to come out in public dressed like this. She asked what kind of parent my aunt was. My aunt just stared at her for a long moment. I could see the anger building in her eyes, but she kept her voice calm and steady. She told the woman that she was actually my aunt, not my mother. Then she said that my mother had just passed away 2 days ago. That wasn't exactly true. It had been longer than 2 days, but the woman didn't need to know that. My aunt was making a point. My aunt continued, saying that she thought I was allowed to wear whatever I wanted right now because I was going through something the woman clearly couldn't comprehend. She told the woman to maybe mind her own business next time. The woman's face changed completely. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, her expression going from smug and self-righteous to horrified and embarrassed in a split second. She didn't say another word. She just turned around and quickly walked away, leaving her card behind. My aunt put her arm around me, and we stood there for a moment while I collected myself. I was shaking, partly from anger and partly from the stress of the confrontation. We finished getting our groceries, trying to move past what had just happened. When we got to the checkout line, we saw the woman again. She was at another register, but she kept her head down and refused to look in our direction. She knew she'd messed up. She knew she'd said terrible things to someone who was grieving, someone she knew nothing about, and now she had to live with that. My boyfriend and I have met at a mutual friend's barbecue, hit it off, and after about 6 months of dating, he asked me to move into his place. He owns this massive house that he bought years ago before the market went crazy. Honestly, it's way too big for just 2 people, but he loves it, and I'm not complaining about the space. When I moved in, we had a conversation about finances. He makes significantly more money than I do, so he offered to cover the mortgage, utilities, and property taxes. I thought that was incredibly generous, so I insisted on paying for my own stuff like my phone bill, car insurance, internet, car payment, groceries, and gas. It seemed fair to both of us at the time. I work from home doing customer service, which means I'm here all day. My boyfriend has 4 dogs that he had before we met. They're all rescues and they're sweet, but they're a handful. Since I'm home, I naturally became the one who lets them out, feeds them, plays with them, and takes them to the vet when needed. I don't mind it most days because I love animals, and they keep me company while I'm working. On top of my full-time job and taking care of the dogs, I do almost all of the housework. I clean the bathrooms, vacuum, dust, organize, and do all the cooking. My boyfriend does his own laundry because he's particular about how his work clothes are washed, and he mows the lawn most of the time. Every once in a while, he'll help with dishes or throw some meat on the grill for me, but that's about the extent of his contributions to the household chores. I've always tried to be thoughtful about dinner. I plan meals, go grocery shopping, prep everything, cook it, and always make extra so there are leftovers. My boyfriend works long hours and I know he gets hungry, so I started making sure there was enough food for him to take to work the next day. Every night after dinner, I portion out the leftovers into a nice container, seal it up, and put it in the fridge where he can easily find it. All he has to do in the morning is open the fridge, grab the container, put it in a lunch bag, and throw it in his backpack. Last Tuesday, I made this really good chicken pasta dish with garlic bread. I packed up his portion like I always do and put it in the fridge. The next morning, I was in the middle of a work call when he came into my office. He asked me if I had packed his lunch. I muted myself quickly and told him that yes, the pasta was in a container in the fridge. He said he knew it was in the fridge, but he wanted to know if I had actually packed it for him. I was confused by the question. I explained that I had put it in a container and placed it in the fridge, so all he needed to do was grab it. He sighed like I had done something wrong and said that wasn't really packing his lunch. He told me I was supposed to put it in a bag and then in his backpack so he could just grab it and go. I stared at him for a second, thinking he had to be joking. I asked if he was being serious. He said yes, he was completely serious. He explained that he was running late most mornings and it would be helpful if I actually finished the job. I pointed out that all he had to do was open the fridge and pick up the container, which would take about 5 seconds. He argued that since I was already handling the food anyway, why couldn't I just put it in his backpack because it wasn't that hard? I felt my blood pressure rising, but I kept my voice calm because I was still technically on a work call. I told him that he was an adult and could put a container in a bag himself, and that I wasn't his mother. He acted surprised and said he didn't realize that asking me to do one more small thing was such a big deal. Then he added that I was home all day anyway. That comment hit me wrong. I reminded him that I was home all day working, plus taking care of his dogs, cleaning his house, and cooking his meals. He corrected me and said it was our house, and since he paid for most of it, he didn't think it was unreasonable to expect a little more effort from me. I had to unmute myself and tell my supervisor I needed to step away for a moment, then muted again. I asked him what he meant by more effort, pointing out that I did everything around here except mow the lawn and do his laundry. I said that he occasionally helped with dishes and that was it. He defended himself by saying he worked 10-hour days and was tired when he got home. He said I had a cushy work-from-home job where I could do whatever I wanted. I explained that my job involved being on calls and being monitored constantly, and that when I wasn't working I was doing everything else to keep the house running. He rolled his eyes and said, "Fine, forget he said anything." He added that he would pack his own lunch like he was 5 years old. Then he left, and I sat there shaking. I finished my work call and spent the rest of the day fuming. That evening I didn't cook dinner. When he got home and saw nothing on the stove, he looked confused and asked what was for dinner. I told him I didn't know and asked what he was making. He said he thought I was cooking. I said I was too lazy to finish the job and figured he could handle it himself since he was so capable. He opened the fridge, grabbed some cold cuts, and made a sandwich without saying a word to me. The next morning I didn't make any coffee or set anything out for him. I heard him stomping around the kitchen before he left for work. This went on for 3 days. No cooking, no packing anything, no extra effort on my part. On Thursday night, he finally approached me and said he got it and that he was sorry. He admitted he shouldn't have called me lazy. I told him I wasn't lazy and that I did more than my share around here, and he didn't appreciate any of it. He agreed that I was right and apologized again. He asked if we could just go back to normal. I asked him what normal meant, whether it was the normal where I did everything, and he complained that I didn't do enough. I said no thanks to that. He backtracked and said that wasn't what he meant. He said he just thought that since I was already handling the food anyway, it made sense. I cut him off and told him to stop. I said if he wanted me to put his lunch in his backpack, he needed to start doing half of the housework. I added that if he wanted a mother, he should go visit his own. He stood there looking uncomfortable for a moment. He said that was fair and that he would start helping more. I raised my eyebrow and asked him what specifically he would be starting with. He offered to do dishes every night. I asked what else. He said he would clean the bathrooms on weekends. I asked for more. He said he would take over feeding the dogs in the morning. I told him now we were getting somewhere. He actually followed through with everything he promised, and now he packs his own lunch every morning without complaining about it. My parents opened this place 30 years ago when they first immigrated here. They worked every single day, barely taking breaks, building it from nothing into something the whole neighborhood loved. When my dad's health started failing 2 years ago, I left my office job to help run it. It wasn't the career path I'd planned, but family comes first. My mom still comes in to help with the books, and my dad stops by when he's feeling up to it just to chat with the regulars. This place is our legacy, and I take that responsibility seriously. It was a typical Saturday afternoon. We had a decent crowd, nothing overwhelming. Families with kids, a few couples, some regulars at the counter. I was helping one of my servers clear tables when I noticed a woman at table 7 getting loud. She was alone, middle-aged, and looked completely out of place in our casual neighborhood diner. At the table next to hers sat a young pregnant woman with her husband. The pregnant woman looked close to tears, and her husband had his arm around her protectively. I walked over to check what was happening and immediately saw the problem. The woman at table 7 said loudly that some of them were trying to enjoy their meal without having to look at people who clearly couldn't control themselves. The pregnant woman's husband stood up immediately and asked what she had just said to his wife. She repeated that she'd said what she said. She added that if the pregnant woman was going to waddle around in public looking like a beached whale, she should expect comments. She called it disgusting. I stepped in before things could escalate further. I told the woman that her behavior was completely unacceptable and that I needed her to apologize and keep her comments to herself. She asked if we couldn't speak our minds anymore. She insisted she was a paying customer and had rights. I agreed that she had the right to eat her meal respectfully, but she didn't have the right to harass other customers. The pregnant woman was crying now and I felt my blood boil. My own sister had just had a baby 6 months ago, and I remembered how sensitive she was during her pregnancy, how self-conscious she felt. This woman had no right to make someone feel that way. The rude customer insisted that the pregnant woman should be the one to leave. She claimed nobody wanted to see that while they were eating. I told her she needed to leave immediately. She protested that I couldn't kick her out because she was a customer. She threatened to sue me for discrimination. I explained that she was harassing another customer and I had every right to refuse service. I told her to please leave or I would call the police. She stood up dramatically, knocking her chair back. She said fine, but that I hadn't heard the last of this. She called the place a dump and said she didn't know how we even got a business license. I walked her to the door, making sure she actually left. The pregnant couple thanked me profusely, but I told them not to worry about it and that their meal was on the house. They didn't want to accept at first, but I insisted. The husband shook my hand, and his wife gave me a hug before they left shortly after. I went back to work, checking on tables, helping in the kitchen. About 15 minutes later, one of my servers came running up to me and said I needed to see something. She told me the woman from before was outside. I looked through the window and saw her with a can of spray paint, actively vandalizing our front window. Black paint covered the glass in crude letters that spelled out various profanities and insults. I ran for the door, but two of my staff members stopped me. They said to wait because they were recording everything. They told me to let her finish, so we had everything on video. They both had their phones out, clearly capturing everything. I realized they were right. If I confronted her now, it would just be he said, she said. But with video evidence, she couldn't deny anything. We watched as she finished spray painting and then threw the can down. She looked around, and I saw her bend down to pick up several rocks from the decorative landscaping we had out front. She yelled that if we thought we could kick her out, she'd show us what happened when we disrespected her. She raised her arm, ready to throw the first rock at our window. That's when I saw them. Two police officers walking down the sidewalk, having clearly witnessed at least part of what was happening. They'd stopped right behind her. The first officer told her to put the rock down and put her hands where they could see them. She spun around. She stammered that this wasn't what it looked like. She claimed they kicked her out for no reason and she was defending herself. The second officer told her they'd watched her vandalize the property and ordered her to put her hands behind her back. She protested that they didn't understand. She insisted they discriminated against her and she had rights. She yelled that they couldn't arrest her. She tried to pull away when the first officer reached for her arm, but he grabbed it strongly. The second officer helped, and within seconds, they had her in handcuffs. She was screaming the entire time about lawsuits and police brutality and how this was all a misunderstanding. The first officer told her that she had the right to remain silent and suggested she use it. They walked her to their patrol car, which was parked just down the street. She fought and screamed the whole way, attracting attention from everyone nearby. After getting her secured in the back of the car, both officers came into the diner. The second officer said they needed to speak with the manager or owner. I told them that was me. The first officer explained that they'd seen the vandalism but wanted to know what led up to it. I explained everything that happened inside the diner. My staff members showed them the videos they'd recorded of her spray painting the window. We also had security camera footage from inside showing her harassment of the pregnant woman. The second officer said they would need copies of all of this for evidence. He explained that she was being charged with vandalism, harassment, and disorderly conduct. He mentioned there might be more charges depending on what the district attorney decided. My staff and several customers gave statements. The whole process took about an hour. When the officers finally left, I looked at our front window covered in black spray paint and crude words. One of my longtime servers walked up beside me. She said that at least we got it on video, and at least the woman was going to face what she deserved. I agreed but said I just wished people like that didn't exist in the first place. We spent the rest of the evening carefully cleaning the spray paint off the window. It took hours and some special solvent, but we got most of it off. The next day, I had a professional cleaning company come finish the job. Word spread quickly in the neighborhood about what happened. Several customers who'd been there that day came back specifically to tell me they were glad I'd stood up to her. The pregnant couple even sent flowers with a card thanking me for defending them. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the district attorney's office. They wanted me to testify if the case went to trial, but they thought she'd likely take a plea deal given the video evidence. Sure enough, she pleaded guilty to avoid trial. She got community service, probation, and had to pay restitution for the damages to our window, plus a fine. I grew up in a small town on the South Island of New Zealand, surrounded by rolling hills and more sheep than people. After finishing university with a degree in marketing, I realized that if I wanted to build a real career, I'd need to leave. The job market back home was limited, and most of my friends had already scattered across the globe looking for opportunities. So at 23, I packed my life into 2 suitcases and moved to Sydney. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I'd landed a junior position at a small advertising firm, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was starting something meaningful. The city was overwhelming compared to what I was used to, but I was determined to make it work. My flatmate became my first real friend in Australia. We'd met through a rental listing online, and by some stroke of luck, we actually got along. She was from Melbourne originally, knew Sydney well enough to show me around, and didn't mind my endless questions about how things worked here. We'd been living together for about 3 weeks when this incident happened. It was a Saturday afternoon, and we decided to take the bus into the city to explore some markets. I was still getting used to public transport, still figuring out which routes went where. We'd grabbed seats near the back and were chatting about work, about the upcoming weekend, about nothing particularly important. I was just happy to have someone to talk to, someone who made this massive city feel a little less lonely. That's when I noticed him. Middle-aged guy, probably in his late 40s, with a beer belly straining against his polo shirt. He'd been sitting a few rows ahead, but suddenly got up and moved closer to where we were sitting. At first I thought maybe he just wanted a different seat, but then he started staring at me with this weird smile on his face. He commented on my accent, saying I sounded like I was from New Zealand. I confirmed that I was and told him I'd just arrived a few weeks ago. He asked what brought me over, and I explained it was for work, that there were better opportunities here. My flatmate gave me a look that said she was already getting weird vibes from this guy, but I was trying to be polite. He seemed harmless enough, just overly friendly in that way some people are. He continued the conversation, asking if I was settling in alright. I told him yeah, it had been good so far, though I was still getting used to everything. Then he mentioned that New Zealanders make great lamb. He said he was a butcher and that everyone always loved the New Zealand lamb, claiming it was the best quality stuff. I politely acknowledged that it was nice to hear. Pleasant enough exchange, if a bit random. But then his smile turned into this smirk, and I knew something obnoxious was coming. He launched into a crude joke about how everyone knows what goes on over there in New Zealand, making a disgusting comment about all New Zealanders being sheep shaggers. He laughed at his own joke like it was the funniest thing he'd ever said. The bus went quiet. My flatmate's jaw dropped. A few other passengers turned to look. This man was just standing there, grinning like he'd told the funniest joke in the world, completely oblivious to how inappropriate he was being. I felt my face flush, partly from embarrassment, partly from anger. I'd been here less than a month and already had to deal with this tired, offensive stereotype. I could have ignored him, could have just turned away and let it go, but something in me snapped. I was tired of being polite to people who thought casual rudeness was acceptable just because they found their own jokes funny. I agreed with him that we did have great lamb. He seemed pleased with himself, saying that at least I had a sense of humor about it. But I wasn't done. I asked him if he knew what we did with the sheep after we'd finished shagging them, using his own crude language back at him. His grin faltered slightly. He clearly hadn't expected me to engage further. I could see the confusion starting to creep into his expression. Then I delivered the punchline. I told him we send them over to Australia and that Australians eat them. I added that they're extra tender that way, letting the implication hang in the air. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The smug confidence drained away completely. Other passengers were either trying not to laugh or looking at him with disgust. and he suddenly seemed to realize that his joke hadn't gone the way he'd planned. He started muttering something about crazy women, his words barely coherent as he backed away. He said something else under his breath that I couldn't quite catch and quickly shuffled back to his original seat near the front of the bus. He got off at the very next stop, even though I'm pretty sure it wasn't his stop based on how quickly he made the decision to leave. My flatmate burst out laughing the second the doors closed behind him. She couldn't believe what had just happened, saying it was perfect and asking if I'd seen his face. Other passengers were smiling now too, and one older woman even gave me a thumbs up from across the aisle. I felt this rush of satisfaction, the kind you get when you finally stand up for yourself after years of biting your tongue. The rest of the bus ride was infinitely more pleasant. My flatmate and I spent it laughing about the encounter, replaying the moment over and over. She kept imitating the look on his face when he realized what I'd said. I felt a little more confident about my place in this new city. Some people would always be rude, would always think their offensive jokes were harmless fun, but at least I knew I could handle them. We made it to the markets that afternoon and had a wonderful time browsing through the stalls. My flatmate told the story to a few of our other friends later that week, and it became this running joke between us. Whenever someone made a comment about New Zealand, she'd give me this knowing look and we'd both start laughing. That was 12 years ago now, and I still think about that bus ride sometimes. The encounter could have ruined my day, could have made me feel small and unwelcome in this new country, but instead it became one of my favorite memories from those early days in Sydney. I never saw that man again, though I sometimes wondered if he ever told anyone the story. I doubted it. I've been at this company for a while now, and part of my job is sending reports to our biggest client. It's straightforward stuff. I send them 2 different reports each week. The first one goes out twice a week, on Tuesday and Friday. That's the open order report, which shows every order we're working on fulfilling for them. The second report goes out once a week and shows what orders we shipped the previous week. Together, these reports give the customer a complete picture of everything we're doing for them, both the stuff that's in progress and the stuff we've already finished and sent out. The second report, the one about shipped orders, that was my idea. When I first started handling these accounts, I noticed there was no easy way to track what had already been shipped. I had to piece together information from different places, and it was a mess. So I went to the IT department and asked if they could create a tool that would generate this report automatically. They did, and it's been working great. The tool lets you select which dates you want to include in the report, so if I'm sending it today and I want last week's data, I just select those dates and boom, done. The reason I send the second report on Mondays instead of Fridays is really important. Our software system doesn't update the shipping information right away. There's a delay. If I try to send the report on Friday afternoon, the data from that day isn't in the system yet. Sometimes even Thursday's data is still being processed. So sending it on Monday morning means everything from the previous week is finally updated and accurate. Makes sense, right? I explained all of this to my manager during our one-on-one meeting on the 18th. I walked him through the whole process. I told him why Monday works better, how the system updates, all of it. He seemed to understand at the time, or at least I thought he did. Then on the 26th, I got an email from him. He had completely misunderstood what I told him. He thought that if I sent the report on Monday, it would include that Monday plus the previous Tuesday through Friday. So like 4 days from last week and 1 day from this week, which would be weird and confusing. He said he didn't like this solution at all and found it confusing for the client. His solution was that starting immediately, I needed to extend my hours until billing is complete, which happens around 4:30 in the afternoon. I normally leave at 4. Look, I don't mind staying late to do my job, that's not the issue. But I knew this wasn't going to solve the problem. The system delay doesn't care what time I leave. Even if I stay until 4:30 and send the report then, Friday's data still won't be updated yet. But he was my manager, so whatever. I went to his office to clear up the confusion. I wanted to explain that the report doesn't work the way he thought it did. I walked in and started to speak, but before I could even finish my second word, he interrupted me in a raised voice. He told me he didn't care and that he wanted the report sent on Friday. I was caught off guard by his tone, so I just agreed with him and turned to leave. But he kept going, his voice still raised. He insisted again that I needed to send the report on Friday and that the discussion was over. I agreed again and left his office. Fine. He wants it sent on Friday. I'll send it on Friday. The next day was Friday the 27th. I stayed late, refreshing the report tool over and over, waiting for the data to update. I knew it wasn't going to. At 4:30, I generated the report and looked at it. Just like I predicted, Friday's shipments were missing. The data wasn't there, but my manager had made it very clear what he wanted, so I sent the incomplete report to our biggest client and went home. On Saturday, I got an email from my manager. The report wasn't complete. Friday's shipments were missing. I needed to send a corrected report first thing Monday morning. I don't work weekends, so I didn't see this until Monday. I replied and explained the situation again. I told him there's only one tool to generate this report, and there is a delay in the system updating. I reminded him that this was exactly why I had suggested sending the report on Mondays in the first place. I asked if there was another tool or method I wasn't aware of. I also pointed out that now the invoicing report and the shipping report didn't match, which was going to confuse the client even more. His response came back quick. He said the problem was that I had sent the report without looking at it first. I wrote back immediately and told him that I had looked at it. I had seen that Friday's data was missing, but I had done exactly what he told me to do. Now we looked unorganized and inconsistent to our biggest customer. There was a pause. Then he replied saying the information should be available on Fridays. He said he'd asked someone higher up in the company about when the report updates. Guess what that person told him? The report doesn't update until between 4:30 and 5:15 in the evening, when everyone is gone for the day. The exact thing I've been trying to tell him all along. This morning, I got another email. He wrote that we could talk about when we want to send the report, adding it like some casual heads up. Oh, really? We can talk about it now? After I sent an incomplete report to our biggest client and made us look incompetent, after he shut me down and refused to listen when I tried to explain this exact problem, I haven't responded yet. I'm just sitting here at my desk staring at that email. Part of me wants to reply with something sarcastic, but I know that won't help anything. The other part of me is just tired. I did exactly what he told me to do, and now somehow we're going to have a conversation about what I knew was the right approach from the beginning. I guess we'll see what happens in that conversation, but I already know how I'm going to start it. I'm going to suggest we send the shipping report on Monday mornings, when the data is actually updated and accurate. You know, the thing I've been saying all along. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.